Long before history began recording the world in ink and stone, something existed that does not fit into the story we have been told. Not a lost city, not a forgotten empire buried beneath ruins. Something far more unsettling. A world that didn't disappear, but slipped out of reach. Like a signal, still broadcasting through the air, waiting to be received. But the instruments that once understood it are gone. Buried beneath centuries of memory, beneath myth, beneath language itself, there remains a trace of that world. Not in monuments, not in artifacts, but in a single vast transmission preserved across time. An ancient text so immense, so layered, that it was never meant to be read as a simple story. It was meant to remember. That text is the Mahabharata. With over 100,000 verses, it stands as the longest epic ever created. So vast that tradition itself claims, what is found here may be found elsewhere. But what is not found here exists nowhere at all. Most see it as a tale of war, a conflict of brothers, the collapse of a dynasty. But that is only the surface, because hidden within it is something else entirely. Not a story, but a map of a forgotten age, when the boundary between human and divine was not distant or symbolic, but immediate, lived, and real. A civilization not built on power or conquest, but on a connection we no longer understand. This is what the ancient sages tried to preserve, and this is what the Mahabharata still whispers to those who are willing to listen. Chapter 1. How Gods Lived in the Civilization of Dvapara Yuga. Imagine a world where the sacred and the mundane are one, where knowledge isn't a subject learned, but a living experience woven into the very fabric of daily life. A world where the cities themselves are as much an expression of divine understanding as they are of human ingenuity, built not merely from stone and clay, but from cosmic principles that shape every breath, every step, every action. This was the world of Dvapara Yuga, an age long past, preserved in the ancient texts, and, in particular, the Mahabharata, a time when human civilization existed not as a fragmented material pursuit, but as an intricate dance between the physical and the divine. A time when knowledge flowed through humanity like a river, alive and ever-present, passed from teacher to student, from generation to generation. As we step into this world, the first thing that strikes you is the cities. Vast and majestic, not mere collections of buildings, but places where the energy of the cosmos was understood and reflected in every street, every structure, every stone. The cities of Dvapara Yuga. The Mahabharata describes cities in terms so grand that they seem almost otherworldly. The ancient cities were not just functional spaces for trade and politics. They were deeply designed to reflect cosmic order, constructed with knowledge that today we can hardly imagine. These cities were said to have been crafted with divine guidance, built according to patterns that aligned with the very structure of the universe. One of the most remarkable examples of such a city is Indraprastha, the capital of the Pandavas. It was not a city that had grown organically over time, as most cities do. Instead, it was created with purpose and divine intelligence. When the Pandavas first took possession of the land, it was a forest, untouched by human hands. But under the guidance of Lord Krishna and the divine architect Vishwakarma, the city was born, its streets laid out in perfect harmony with the natural world, its structures reflecting the perfect balance of nature and divine wisdom. The Maya Sabha, the palace of the Pandavas, is another example of the divine connection to human architecture. Descriptions of the palace are vivid and intricate, giving us a glimpse into a world where beauty, precision, and spiritual truth all existed simultaneously. The floors of the palace, for example, were made from crystals so pure that they appeared as though still water, so flawlessly laid that guests would often lift their robes, thinking they were walking on water. And the palace's walls were not mere stone or brick. They were described as translucent barriers, so perfectly crafted that they seemed to be made from light itself. The illusion wasn't meant to deceive, but rather to demonstrate the extraordinary understanding of materials and energy that the architects of Dvapara Yuga possessed. This was not an artifice made to impress or entertain. It was a manifestation of divine knowledge, a glimpse into a world where every element, even architecture, was imbued with the sacred. But the Mahabharata doesn't just describe a single palace or a few remarkable buildings. The epic is filled with accounts of cities designed with the same principles, cities where the streets were built with cosmic geometry, where the relationship between space and time was deeply understood, and where the gods themselves were thought to walk the streets as guests rather than as distant, unreachable entities. Hastinapura, the capital of the Kauravas, another key city in the Mahabharata, was said to have been so carefully planned that its streets were wide enough to accommodate chariots traveling in opposite directions. Its walls were described as shining with a brilliance that made the city visible to travelers from miles away, even from a full day's journey. The city had systems for waste disposal so advanced that they were mentioned in passing, almost as if they were a natural part of life, so integrated into the daily rhythm that no one even noticed the precision behind them. This attention to the smallest details was not incidental. It was part of the very fabric of life in Dvapara Yuga. The cities, their architecture, and their systems were not simply for human convenience. They were an extension of the divine will, designed to keep the order of the universe intact. From the way water flowed through the city to the placement of temples and sacred sites, everything was arranged with the knowledge of how the universe worked at its deepest level. The knowledge of Dvapara Yuga. But the cities were only the surface expression of a much deeper truth. Beneath the grand architecture and the divine urban planning lay the true treasure of Dvapara Yuga, a way of knowing, a transmission of wisdom that was not merely intellectual, but embodied in the very lives of the people who lived within these cities. In Dvapara Yuga, knowledge was not a commodity that could be bought or sold. It was not a body of information that could be stored in books or learned in classrooms. Knowledge was a living, breathing thing, passed from one person to another through the deepest possible connection, a relationship of teacher to student, of guru to disciple. And this knowledge was not simply facts. It was a way of being in the world, a way of perceiving the cosmos and one's place within it. The Mahabharata tells us of many such knowledge traditions, but none more revered than that of the great teacher Drona. Drona, who was the teacher of the Pandavas and Kauravas, was not just a warrior and a strategist. He was a living embodiment of the martial knowledge that had been passed down through generations. His knowledge was not just a set of techniques. It was a relationship with the very principles of warfare and combat, passed down from teacher to student through direct transmission. In fact, Drona's knowledge didn't begin with him. It was passed to him by his own teacher, and to his teacher before that. The chain of knowledge in Dvapara Yuga was a living thread, stretching all the way back to the gods themselves. In this way, the people of Dvapara Yuga maintained a direct line to divine wisdom, a wisdom that was both practical and philosophical, physical and metaphysical. The martial tradition, like all knowledge in Dvapara Yuga, was not learned through rote memorization or drills alone. It was a deeply personal experience that changed the very consciousness of the student. To be taught by Drona was not simply to learn how to wield a bow or strike with a sword. It was to become a vessel for the knowledge itself, to embody the very principles of Dharma, righteous action, and Artha, material success, to internalize the connection between the physical world and the divine. Arjuna, one of Drona's greatest students, was a master of this process. His training under Drona was not just about perfecting his skills in battle. It was about mastering the art of the mind. In the famous archery test, when Arjuna alone could focus on the eye of a rotating fish, the lesson was not just one of skill. It was a lesson in total concentration, in clearing the mind of distractions, and in becoming one with the target, the weapon, and the world around him. This is what knowledge in Dvapara Yuga was, something that changed the very nature of the person who received it. Knowledge was not something external to be acquired. It was something that reshaped you, something that became a part of your very being, a living connection to the cosmos itself. The divine and human connection. In Dvapara Yuga, the line between the divine and human was not so clearly drawn as it is today. The gods walked among the people as friends and guides. They were not distant, unreachable beings, but active participants in the affairs of the world. Krishna, the supreme deity of the Mahabharata, was not just a distant god in the heavens. He was a charioteer, a friend, a counselor, a king, and a warrior. In his interactions with the Pandavas and others, Krishna did not act like an omnipotent force, distant from the struggles of the world. Instead, he participated directly in the lives of human beings, offering guidance, support, and at times, intervention. Krishna's role as a divine advisor is most clearly seen in his conversations with Arjuna in the Bhagavad Gita. But his presence was felt throughout the Mahabharata. He didn't simply advise from a distance. He lived with his people. He shared their struggles, and he engaged in their battles. He embodied the divine presence in the world, bridging the gap between the heavens and the earth. This constant interaction between the human and the divine was not seen as unusual in Dvapara Yuga. It was the natural order of things. People did not live their lives in isolation from the divine. They lived in a world where the gods were as real and present as the people around them. And this direct relationship between humanity and the divine was what made the civilization of Dvapara Yuga so unique. The world before the fall. But what happened to this extraordinary civilization? How did such a world, so full of wisdom, knowledge, and divine connection, come to an end? As the Mahabharata tells us, the end of this age came not through external invasion or natural disaster. The destruction came from within, through the corruption of human nature, through the breaking of the bonds that held the world together, the war of Kurukshetra. The great battle between the Pandavas and the Kauravas was the moment when the cosmic order was shattered, and the world began its descent into the darkness of Kali Yuga. Chapter 2. The Living Knowledge of Dvapara Yuga. In the world of Dvapara Yuga, knowledge was not something learned in a classroom or simply acquired from books. It was a living, breathing force, alive in the bodies and minds of the people who carried it. It was not merely information passed down through generations. It was a direct and sacred transmission that transformed those who received it. To know in Dvapara Yuga was not simply to possess facts. It was to embody the very essence of the universe itself, to live in alignment with cosmic law. This profound relationship between knowledge and life was most evident in the way that teachers, or gurus, interacted with their students. In the age of Kali Yuga, knowledge was a gift passed from one soul to another, not through impersonal textbooks, but through a deeply personal, spiritual connection. The bond between teacher and disciple was one of profound intimacy, not just of mind, but of spirit. Knowledge was not something you could merely intellectualize. It was something you became. The lineages of knowledge. The Mahabharata tells us that the great teachers of Kali Yuga, like Drona, the martial teacher of the Pandavas and Kauravas, did not simply impart techniques or methods. What they shared was far more than skill. They transmitted a way of seeing the world, a way of being. The knowledge they passed on was a living current, flowing through the teacher and into the student. To learn was to receive, not just information, but a complete transformation of the self. The Mahabharata describes a knowledge system unlike any other. It was not just intellectual knowledge, nor was it fragmented and isolated. It was a holistic understanding, one that included both physical and metaphysical truths. This knowledge was embedded in every aspect of life, in the martial arts, in statecraft, in architecture, in the sciences, and in the very way of being in the world. There was no separation between the material and the spiritual. Every action, every choice, was seen as an opportunity to align with the sacred. One of the most notable features of the knowledge system of Kali Yuga was its lineage-based transmission. Knowledge was passed down from one teacher to the next in an unbroken chain. The knowledge wasn't simply intellectual property. It was a living, dynamic force that could only be transferred through a specific relationship, a personal transmission from one soul to another. This chain of transmission was sacred, and it was the key to preserving the integrity of the knowledge. The Mahabharata speaks of the importance of these lineages, how the knowledge passed down through them could be traced all the way back to the gods themselves. The lineages of the great teachers like Drona were not merely genealogies. They were spiritual legacies, a record of the transmission of divine wisdom through time. The Mahabharata shows us that there was a time when the knowledge of the universe was still within reach, a time when the connection between the human and the divine was still intact, the teacher and the student. In the Mahabharata, one of the most striking aspects of the relationship between teacher and student is how it was rooted in the sacred. The guru-shishya, teacher-student bond, was seen not just as a formal educational relationship, but as a spiritual one. It was a mutual exchange of energy, where both teacher and student would enter into a space of deep connection. The teacher would pass on not just knowledge, but a way of being, a way of perceiving the world. The student, in turn, would receive this transmission with reverence, and their life would be transformed. One of the most famous examples of this kind of teacher-student relationship is that between Drona and Arjuna. Drona was not just a martial teacher. He was a living embodiment of martial knowledge. His understanding of warfare was not merely tactical, it was metaphysical. In Drona's teaching, there was a deep understanding of the forces that shaped the universe, and he passed that understanding on to his students. But Drona's knowledge was not merely about skills in battle. It was about cultivating the mind and spirit. Drona was a master of the internal disciplines of focus, concentration, and intention. He taught his students that to be successful in battle, they had to first master themselves. When Arjuna took up his bow, It was not just a physical act. It was a mental and spiritual one. Arjuna, like all the great warriors of Dvapara Yuga, understood that every action, every thought, every intention carried weight. To shoot an arrow was not just to aim at a target. It was to engage with the very forces of the universe. Arjuna's famous ability to hit the eye of the rotating fish was not just a feat of precision. It was a demonstration of his complete mastery over his mind. In that moment, he was not simply using his physical strength to hit a target. He was using his consciousness to align with the cosmic order. This relationship between teacher and student, this direct transmission of knowledge, is one of the central themes of the Mahabharata. It is not just about teaching techniques. It is about sharing an entire worldview. It is about awakening the potential within the student so that they can understand and connect with the universe in a way that was once considered normal but has since become lost to us. The living knowledge of martial arts. The Mahabharata doesn't simply tell us about the knowledge of warfare. It shows us how warfare in Dvapara Yuga was a reflection of the cosmic order itself. The martial traditions of Dvapara Yuga were not just about physical strength or skill. They were about embodying the divine in every aspect of the warrior's life. The warriors of the Mahabharata were not simply soldiers. They were deeply spiritual beings who understood the principles of dharma, righteousness, and adharma, unrighteousness, and applied them to every action they took. The weapons used in battle, such as the astra, were not merely physical objects. They were extensions of the mind and spirit. The astra was a weapon of consciousness. It was not a sword or an arrow in the traditional sense. It was a force that could be invoked through mental discipline, through the proper alignment of thought and intention. To wield an astra was to align oneself with the cosmic forces that governed the universe. The Mahabharata shows us that in Dvapara Yuga, to wield a weapon was not just a physical act. It was a mental and spiritual one as well. But it was not just the warriors who were trained in such knowledge. Every person in Dvapara Yuga was expected to cultivate their mind, body, and spirit. Knowledge was not something confined to a specific class or profession. It was something that everyone was expected to engage with. This is what made the civilization of Dvapara Yuga so extraordinary. It was not just about material success or wealth. It was about alignment with the universe, with the divine order. The role of the gods in knowledge transmission. What set Dvapara Yuga apart from the world we know today was the direct relationship between humans and the divine. The gods did not remain distant from human affairs. They were actively involved in the lives of mortals. The Mahabharata shows us a world in which the gods walked among people, offering guidance, sharing knowledge, and participating in the human struggle. Krishna, the supreme deity of the Mahabharata, was not a distant god, sitting high in the heavens. He was a guide, a friend, a charioteer, and a teacher. He participated in the lives of the Pandavas and others, not just as a divine figure, but as someone who offered practical, real-world advice. His teachings were not abstract. They were practical lessons in how to live a righteous life, how to make decisions, how to act with clarity in moments of crisis. In the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna shares the most profound of all lessons with Arjuna, his student and friend. The Gita is a conversation between Arjuna and Krishna that takes place on the battlefield, in the midst of war. Arjuna is struggling with the moral dilemma of having to fight in a war that will bring immense destruction. Krishna's response to him is not simply philosophical, it is a call to action, to live in alignment with the truth, to embrace one's dharma, duty, and to perform actions without attachment to their results. Krishna's teachings were not just for the elite or the powerful. They were meant for everyone. They were a reminder that every human being has a divine nature, and that the way to align with that nature is through knowledge. Knowledge of the self, knowledge of the universe, and knowledge of the divine. The inner transformation. In Dvapara Yuga, knowledge was not just about acquiring information. It was about transformation. It was about changing the way you see the world, the way you engage with it, and the way you live in it. To know was to be transformed. And this transformation was not a solitary endeavor. It was a communal one. The guru-shishya relationship, the transmission of knowledge, was not just a means of learning, it was a means of awakening. The true nature of knowledge in Dvapara Yuga was not to be found in intellectual understanding alone. It was to be found in living, breathing, and experiencing the world through a lens of divine wisdom. The Mahabharata is filled with characters who embody this transformation. Arjuna, who sees the world with the eyes of a warrior and the wisdom of a sage. Yudhishthira, who lives in constant alignment with Dharma, despite the challenges that he faces. And Krishna, who embodies the ultimate wisdom and knowledge of the universe. This knowledge was not something that could be separated from the life lived. It was life itself, lived with purpose, with clarity, and with devotion. The world of Dvapara Yuga was a world in which knowledge was inseparable from the divine, from the sacred, and from the act of living. Chapter 3. The Weapons of Thought, Astra and Vimana. The civilization of Dvapara Yuga was not only remarkable for its knowledge, architecture, and divine connection, it was also a world where the very nature of power itself was understood in ways that defy the limitations of our current understanding. The Mahabharata introduces us to a unique and profound concept. Weapons that are not just physical objects, but instruments of consciousness, thought, and divine intention. These were not the swords, spears, or arrows we know today. These were weapons that could destroy not just the body, but the very fabric of existence itself. These weapons were known as astras, divine weapons with the power to change the course of the universe. Alongside these astras, the Mahabharata also speaks of vimanas, flying machines of celestial design, capable of transcending the boundaries of space and time. Together, the astras and the vimanas reveal a deeper understanding of power, technology, and consciousness. A world where the boundaries between the divine and the human were not just blurred, but where these two realms coexisted seamlessly. These mystical weapons offer a glimpse into a world where knowledge, intention, and divine will governed the laws of nature. The Astra, weapons of consciousness. In the world of Dvapara Yuga, the very concept of a weapon was far different from anything we understand today. The Astra was not simply a tool of destruction. It was a force of nature, a weapon of consciousness. The Sanskrit word astra is typically translated as weapon. But this translation does not capture the full depth of its meaning. An astra was not a physical object like a sword or a bow. It was a force invoked through spiritual discipline, mental focus, and divine knowledge. The Mahabharata describes a variety of astras, each with its own unique properties, powers, and methods of invocation. These were not weapons wielded through brute force or physical training alone. They were activated through mantras, rituals, and the alignment of the mind with cosmic forces. The power of the astra lay in the consciousness of the one who invoked it, and in the ability to connect with the divine forces that govern the universe. Perhaps the most famous astra described in the Mahabharata is the Brahmastra, the weapon of Brahma, the creator. The Brahmastra was a weapon capable of destroying all life in a targeted area, rendering the land barren for years. The Mahabharata describes its effects in detail. When the weapon was released, the sky would change color, the air would become dense and hot, and animals and birds would flee in fear, sensing the coming destruction. The explosion itself would release a light as bright as the sun, capable of burning everything in its path. When the Brahmastra was invoked, the atmosphere itself would tremble with its power. This was not a conventional weapon. It was a force of nature, unleashed through a divine connection between the human mind and the cosmos. The Brahmastra was not something you could simply train to use. It required a direct relationship with the divine and the ability to invoke it through the power of consciousness. The use of the Brahmastra was also not without its limitations. The Mahabharata makes it clear that this weapon was not to be used recklessly. Its destruction was so absolute that it could alter the very fabric of existence. Therefore, only those with the highest spiritual training could wield it responsibly. The release of the Brahmastra required not just the knowledge of how to invoke it, but the wisdom to understand when and why it should be used. The Pashupatastra, the most powerful weapon. Another astra described in the Mahabharata is the Pashupatastra, the weapon of Lord Shiva, the destroyer and transformer of the universe. The Pashupatastra was even more powerful than the Brahmastra, capable of destroying the entire universe if released without restraint. The Mahabharata describes how Arjuna, one of the Pandava brothers, receives the Pashupatastra directly from Lord Shiva during his time of pilgrimage. Shiva, recognizing Arjuna's devotion and purity, imparts to him the knowledge of the Pashupatastra, a weapon capable of annihilating not just an army, but the very fabric of reality itself. However, the use of the Pashupatastra came with a severe warning. It must never be used against an ordinary opponent, unless that opponent possessed a weapon of equal destructive capacity. This warning speaks to the responsibility that comes with power. The Pashupatastra was not simply a tool of war. It was a force that could unravel the very order of the universe if misused. Its invocation was so dangerous that its wielder had to be extremely disciplined, both mentally and spiritually, to prevent it from causing irreparable damage. The Pashupatastra was not just a weapon of mass destruction. It was a reminder that the power to destroy the universe was closely tied to the responsibility to protect and preserve it. The Mahabharata teaches that true power is not something to be wielded lightly. It requires wisdom, restraint, and a deep understanding of the forces that govern existence. The astras as metaphors for consciousness. While the astras of the Mahabharata may seem like mere weapons of mass destruction, they carry with them a deeper, more profound message. They are not just physical instruments of war. They are metaphors for the potential of human consciousness to interact with the forces of nature. The Mahabharata shows us that the true power of the astra lies in the mind of the wielder. The astra is activated not through brute force, but through the focused will and intention of the one who invokes it. In this sense, the astra is a reflection of the inner power of the human mind. A mind that, when properly trained and aligned with divine principles, can access the deepest forces of the universe. The astras are also a reflection of the divine connection that existed between the human and the divine in Dvapara Yuga. The gods were not distant, unreachable beings. They were active participants in the world, and their knowledge was accessible to those who had the discipline and devotion to receive it. The astras represent the tools that humanity could use to align itself with the divine order, to access the vast potential of the universe, and to act in harmony with the natural laws that govern existence. In the world of Dvapara Yuga, knowledge and power were not separate. To know was to have power, and to wield power responsibly required wisdom and alignment with the divine. The Mahabharata teaches us that the greatest weapon is not one of physical force, but one of consciousness. A consciousness that is capable of perceiving and aligning with the divine order. The Vimana, vehicles of the divine. Alongside the astras, the Mahabharata also speaks of another fascinating concept, the Vamana. These were not merely the flying machines of our modern imagination. They were celestial vehicles that could travel through the air, move between realms, and transcend the limits of time and space. The Vimanas were described in the Mahabharata as being capable of vertical takeoff, fast travel, and even the ability to navigate the heavens. The most famous of the Vimanas is the Pushpaka Vimana, the flying chariot of Ravana, the king of Lanka. According to the Ramayana, Ravana used the Pushpaka Vimana to travel from Lanka to the mainland, and it was said to have been large enough to carry multiple passengers. The Vimana was capable of traveling faster than any ordinary conveyance, and it responded to the will of its operator in ways that suggested it was not merely a mechanical object, but one that was intimately connected to the mind and consciousness of the pilot. Some texts suggest that the Vimanas were powered by mercury-based engines, while others describe them as being fueled by solar energy, or even by the consciousness of the pilot. What is clear from the descriptions in the Mahabharata is that the Vimanas were not simply technological marvels. They were extensions of the pilot's consciousness, capable of responding to the operator's thoughts, intentions, and awareness. In this sense, the Vimanas are more than just vehicles. They are a symbol of the connection between human consciousness and the divine. They represent the ability to transcend the limitations of the physical world and to navigate the cosmos through the power of the mind. The Vimanas also reflect the idea that technology and consciousness were not separate in Dvapara Yuga. The technology of the time was not driven by materialism or industrial processes. It was driven by spiritual knowledge and divine connection. The connection between Astra and Vimana. Both the Astras and the Vimanas reflect the deep understanding of the human mind and its potential in Dvapara Yuga. These were not mere technologies or weapons in the traditional sense. They were instruments that could only be used by those whose minds were aligned with divine will. They were not built for the masses. They were reserved for those who had attained the highest levels of spiritual mastery. The Mahabharata shows us a world where technology, consciousness, and spirituality were not separate domains. The Astras and Vimanas were tools that bridged the gap between the physical and the divine, allowing their users to access powers that transcended ordinary human limitations. These were not just physical weapons or machines. They were expressions of divine knowledge, knowledge that could only be wielded responsibly by those who were spiritually aligned with the forces of the universe. The end of the age. As we move forward in time, the world of Dvapara Yuga fades into myth. The Mahabharata records the destruction that took place at Kurukshetra, the final battle that marks the end of an age. The astras and the vimanas are no longer wielded by those who understand their true power. The great knowledge of the past becomes fragmented, and the divine connection that once guided humanity begins to fade. The Mahabharata serves as a reminder that the power of the astras and the vimanas was not simply a matter of technology. It was a reflection of a deeper truth. The connection between humanity and the divine, the ability to align oneself with the cosmic order, and the responsibility that comes with such power. Chapter 4. The City Beneath the Sea, Dwarka, and the Memory of a Lost World. There are places in this world where memory does not fade, not completely, not entirely. It lingers quietly beneath the surface, in the shifting sands, in the silence between waves, in the spaces where history and myth begin to blur until it becomes impossible to say where one ends and the other begins. And along the western coast of India, where the Arabian Sea stretches endlessly toward the horizon, there is such a place. A place where, according to the ancient texts, an entire city once stood, a city unlike any other, a city built not just by human hands, but guided by divine intention, a city that shone with such brilliance that even the storytellers of the Mahabharata seemed at times overwhelmed trying to describe it. That city was Dwarka, the birth of a city before Dwarka existed. There was a problem, a growing tension, a world beginning to shift. The stories tell us that Krishna, who had spent much of his early life in the region of Mathura, faced a constant threat from powerful enemies. The land itself, no longer safe, the balance, no longer stable. And so, a decision was made, not to fight endlessly, not to defend what could no longer be protected, but to move, to create something entirely new, a city not born from gradual expansion, not shaped slowly over generations, but envisioned completely from the very beginning, a city designed as a whole, a city that would embody harmony, protection, beauty, and cosmic order, all at once. And so, according to the ancient accounts, Krishna turned not to ordinary builders, but to the divine architect himself, Vishwakarma, the intelligence behind creation, the one through whom form takes shape, the one who does not simply build, but understands why something should be built, and how it should exist in perfect balance with everything around it. But there was one more challenge. There was no land, not enough at least. So Krishna turned to the ocean, to the vast, endless body of water that had stood unchanged for ages, and something remarkable happened. The sea receded, not violently, not suddenly, but willingly, as if responding to a request. Rather than being forced back, the waters withdrew, revealing land beneath, land that had been hidden, waiting, long before any city was imagined. And upon this newly revealed ground, Dwarka began, a city designed with consciousness. Now imagine, slowly, that you are approaching this city, not rushing, just walking gently, as if arriving at a place you've somehow always known. From a distance, you would see it first as light, not harsh light, not blinding, but a soft golden glow, reflecting off surfaces that seemed almost alive. The texts describe buildings that shimmered, not just because of material wealth, but because of how they interacted with light itself. At sunrise, the city appeared to awaken. At sunset, it seemed to dissolve into gold. And as you move closer, details begin to emerge. The streets, wide, open, carefully aligned, not chaotic, not accidental, but arranged with intention. There is a pattern beneath everything, a geometry, something subtle but unmistakable. The layout of Dwarka is often described as resembling a yantra, a sacred geometric form used to represent cosmic structure. But this was not decoration, this was function. Because in that world, space was not empty. It carried energy, movement, flow, and the way a city was arranged influenced the way people felt, thought, lived. In Dwarka, every street, every intersection, every open space was part of a larger design, a design that supported balance, clarity, ease, a city that did not fight against the human experience, but quietly supported it, the life within the city. But a city is not its buildings, it is not its walls, it is not even its design. A city is its people. And life in Dwarka was unlike anything we experience today. Imagine waking in the early morning. The air is cool, still. There is a quiet, but not an emptiness, more like a presence. From the center of the city, sound begins to move outward, soft at first, chanting, ritual, not loud, not overwhelming, but steady, grounding, like a heartbeat. This was the temple. At the center of Dwarka stood a great temple, dedicated to Krishna in his role as the sustaining presence of the city. But it was more than a place of worship. It was the axis, the center from which everything else extended, the place where the connection between the human and the divine was maintained, not occasionally, but continuously. And as the sound of ritual moved through the city, people began their day, not rushed, not fragmented, but in rhythm. There were markets, homes, gardens, spaces for learning, spaces for rest, and everywhere there was a sense of integration. Life was not divided into categories: work, spirituality, family, knowledge. They were all part of the same flow. Children grew up not just learning skills, but absorbing a way of being, a way of seeing the world as interconnected, meaningful, alive. And perhaps most striking of all, there was a sense that the city itself was aware, not conscious in the way a human is, but responsive, supportive, as if the design of Dwarka allowed it to participate in the lives of those who lived within it. Krishna in Dwarka. There is something important that shifts in the stories when Krishna is in Dwarka. Elsewhere, he is dynamic, playful, unpredictable, moving constantly between roles. But in Dwarka, there is a stillness, a kind of settling, as if the world, for a moment, has aligned around him. He is no longer just moving through events. He is at the center of them, not controlling, not forcing, but anchoring. People come to him, not just for answers, but for presence, for clarity, for the quiet understanding that comes from being near someone who sees things completely. And this presence, this quality, it shapes the entire city. Dwarka is not just built around Krishna physically. It is built around what he represents: balance, awareness, connection. And because of that, the city itself becomes something rare, a place where the ideal is not distant, but lived daily, the beginning of the end. But even the most perfect systems are not permanent. This is something the Mahabharata reminds us of. Again and again, everything that arises eventually changes. Everything that is built eventually dissolves. And Dwarka was no exception. The end did not come suddenly, not with fire, not with invasion, but with something quieter, something inevitable. Krishna knew before anyone else. He understood that the time of Dwarka was limited, that the conditions which allowed such a city to exist were already beginning to shift, and he warned the people, gently, without fear, without urgency, simply telling them that the city would not remain. Some listened, some left, others stayed, not out of ignorance, but out of love, because when you have lived in a place like Dwarka, leaving it is not simple. The sea returns, and then, slowly, the ocean began to rise, not violently, not as a disaster, but steadily, quietly, like something returning to where it had always been. The water moved through the outer edges of the city first. Streets, gradually submerged, buildings, slowly claimed. People watched, not in panic, but in a kind of deep, quiet grief, because they had been told, they understood, and yet, understanding does not remove feeling. The temples continued their rituals, even as the water approached, even as the foundations began to disappear beneath the surface. And finally, the central temple, the last structure to remain above the rising sea. Some accounts say the lamps inside were still lit as the water reached the top. And then, Dwarka was gone, not destroyed, not shattered, but submerged, returned, held beneath the ocean, where it would remain for thousands of years. The echo beneath the water. But the story does not end there, because memory has a way of resurfacing. In the late 20th century, explorations along the coast of Gujarat began to uncover something unusual. Structures beneath the water. Not natural formations, but geometric, deliberate walls, foundations, stone anchors, artifacts, evidence of something that had once been built and later submerged. Archaeologists studied the site carefully, cautiously. The dates suggested an ancient origin, thousands of years old, in the same location where the texts had always said Dwarka existed. Now, does this prove the story? Not completely, but it does something else. It opens a possibility that perhaps the line between myth and history is not as clear as we once believed. What Dwarka represents Dwarka is not just a lost city. It is something deeper, a memory of what is possible when human life is aligned with something greater. It represents a way of living where design, knowledge, spirituality, and daily life are not separate, where a city is not just a place to exist, but a place that supports awareness, clarity, connection, and perhaps most importantly, it reminds us that even the most extraordinary things are temporary, but not meaningless, because even though Dwarka is gone, its story remains, and in that story, something continues to speak, softly, patiently, like the ocean itself, waiting for someone to listen. Chapter 5. The Cosmic War at Kurukshetra. The distant sound of soft thunder, a rhythmic pulse echoing across a vast and ancient battlefield. A quiet wind rustles through the trees, and for a moment the air seems thick with the weight of memory. Somewhere, hidden beneath the layers of time, the echoes of a war that was much more than human reach us, fading softly into the present. The tale of Kurukshetra is not simply a story of conflict between two rival factions. It is a story of the cosmos itself, of divine forces descending into the human world and taking form in the midst of battle. It is the struggle between light and darkness, between dharma, righteousness, and adharma, unrighteousness, a conflict that reverberates through every aspect of existence. The Mahabharata recounts the greatest war ever fought on the surface of this earth, a war between the Pandavas and the Kauravas, two branches of a royal family. But it is so much more than a mere political struggle. It is the story of the entire world caught between two opposing forces, where the gods themselves take sides, and the very fate of the universe hangs in the balance. Kurukshetra is the battleground, but its implications stretch far beyond the confines of the field. The call to war, the settings of Kurukshetra. The stage for the Mahabharata's most pivotal conflict is set not in the immediate clash of armies, but in the quiet, tension-filled moments leading up to it. The land of Kurukshetra, a vast plain located in what is now Haryana, India, becomes the setting for not just a war of men, but a war of cosmic principles. But the battle is not just political. It is the manifestation of the larger moral struggle between right and wrong, between fulfilling one's duties and abandoning them for personal gain. Kurukshetra is not just a geographical location. It is a sacred ground. In the Mahabharata, it is described as the site where ancient sages, rishis, meditated, and where divine wisdom once flowed freely. It was a land that had once been revered, and now it would become the place where the forces of righteousness and unrighteousness would come to a head. The Pandavas and Kauravas, two branches of the same royal family, are caught in a bitter struggle for power, but this is more than a war for material possession. The fight for the throne of Hastinapura is framed within the larger cosmic battle, with each character representing a different aspect of dharma, karma, and fate. It is as if the entire world, both human and divine, is holding its breath, waiting for the conflict to unfold. The divinity of war, the gods and their roles. One of the most striking aspects of Kurukshetra is the active participation of the gods in the war. The divine figures of the Mahabharata do not merely watch from afar. They intervene directly in the affairs of men, each side receiving divine aid in its struggle. However, this divine involvement is not straightforward, and it serves to highlight one of the central themes of the Mahabharata: the ambiguity of righteousness. On the side of the Pandavas, Krishna, the supreme god, serves as Arjuna's charioteer and spiritual guide. It is Krishna who, in the famous Bhagavad Gita dialogue, delivers the teachings of Dharma to Arjuna, helping him overcome his doubts and fears as the war begins. Krishna's presence in the war is both a blessing and a burden. His teachings elevate the war from a mere political conflict to a spiritual one, and his involvement is critical to the Pandavas' success. Yet, Krishna's role as a divine participant in the war raises questions about the nature of divine justice, for his involvement is not without its moral complexities. On the other side, the Kauravas, led by Duryodhana, are also aided by divine forces, most notably by the great warrior Bhishma, who is granted the boon of choosing his time of death. Bhishma's role in the war is deeply tragic, for although he fights for the Kauravas, his heart is aligned with the Pandavas. The gods, too, seem to be caught in the paradox of their own involvement in human affairs. They act as guides, warriors, and symbols of the larger cosmic order, but their interventions often blur the line between fate and free will. The participation of the gods, then, is not simply as passive observers. They are active participants in the battle, shaping the course of events in ways that challenge human understanding. Their presence serves as a reminder that the divine is never far from the human experience, that the forces that govern the world are intricately woven into the struggles of men. The Bhagavad Gita, the cosmic conversation. As the battle at Kurukshetra begins, one of the most profound moments in the entire Mahabharata occurs: the dialogue between Arjuna and Krishna on the battlefield. known as the Bhagavad Gita. In the Gita, Krishna addresses Arjuna's moral crisis. Arjuna, the great warrior and son of Pandu, faces a deep dilemma. He must fight against his own family, his teachers, and his friends in a war that he knows will bring destruction. He is torn between his duty as a warrior, kshatriya, and his love for those he must kill. His heart is heavy with sorrow, and he questions the righteousness of the war. Should he fight for the throne of Hastinapura, a throne that was rightfully his, but has been denied to him by the Kauravas? Or should he renounce the battle and seek peace, even at the cost of his dharma? Krishna responds with profound wisdom, teaching Arjuna that duty, dharma, must always come first. He explains that the soul is eternal, and that death is but a transition, not an end. Krishna reveals that the ultimate goal of life is to act without attachment to the results of one's actions. One must fulfill their duty, not for personal gain, but because it is their nature, their destiny, and their responsibility. Through the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna opens Arjuna's eyes to the deeper truths of life, death, and the eternal nature of the soul. This conversation transcends the battle itself, providing timeless guidance on how to navigate the moral dilemmas of life. It is not just a philosophical treatise. It is a call to action, a reminder that one's actions must always align with dharma, regardless of personal feelings or attachments. The fate of Kurukshetra. The cosmic war unfolds. With Arjuna now armed with the knowledge of the Gita, the war at Kurukshetra continues. The battle is brutal and devastating, and the Mahabharata does not shy away from the cost of war, both physical and spiritual. The war is filled with acts of valor, heroism, and sacrifice, but it is also marked by deceit, manipulation, and acts of moral ambiguity. Heroes die and villains are revealed in unexpected ways. Even Krishna, the embodiment of divine justice, engages in actions that challenge our understanding of right and wrong. The most striking example of this is the role of Krishna in the death of Bhishma. Bhishma, one of the greatest warriors in the war, is granted the boon of choosing his time of death. Yet, despite his immense strength and skill, he is ultimately defeated by Arjuna with Krishna's guidance. Krishna directs Arjuna to place his arrows in such a way that Bhishma falls upon a bed of arrows, choosing the moment of his death. Bhishma's death is both a triumph and a tragedy, as he is caught between his loyalty to the Kauravas and his deep love for the Pandavas. His death marks the beginning of the end for the Kauravas. The destruction that follows is immense. The war rages on for 18 days, with countless heroes and warriors falling on both sides. The Pandavas and Kauravas, once noble families bound by blood, are now divided by conflict, their destinies sealed by the choices they make. The gods themselves are unable to prevent the devastation, and even Krishna's divine wisdom cannot undo the tragedy that is unfolding. As the war reaches its climax, the devastation becomes complete. The battlefield of Kurukshetra is littered with the bodies of soldiers, warriors, and kings. The families are torn apart, and the land itself is scarred. The loss is so profound that even the gods are silent, their voices lost amidst the ruin. What began as a struggle for a throne has ended in a tragedy of cosmic proportions. The aftermath. Reflection on the nature of war and dharma. After the war, the Pandavas emerged victorious, but at a terrible cost. The kingdom of Hastinapura is theirs, but the victory feels hollow. Yudhishthira, the eldest Pandava, is crowned king, but he is haunted by the violence and destruction that the war has wrought. The ghosts of the fallen linger in his mind, and he is filled with doubt about the righteousness of the war. In the aftermath, Krishna offers counsel, but there is little solace for those who have lost so much. The war of Kurukshetra serves as a poignant reminder of the complexities of Dharma. In the Mahabharata, Dharma is not a simple, one-dimensional concept. It is layered, complicated, and often contradictory. The battle between the Pandavas and Kauravas is not a struggle between good and evil in the way we often think of it. Instead, it is a conflict between competing understandings of Dharma. Each side believes it is fighting for what is right, and yet, the consequences of their actions are catastrophic. Krishna's teachings in the Bhagavad Gita make it clear that one must act in accordance with their Dharma, even when the consequences are unclear. The path of righteousness is not always the path of ease, and sometimes the cost of fulfilling one's duty is overwhelming. The war at Kurukshetra is a metaphor for the internal battles we all face. Battles between our personal desires and our higher duties, between our attachments and the greater good. The lessons of Kurukshetra. The battle of Kurukshetra ultimately ends not with a decisive victory, but with a sobering realization. The Pandavas, though they have triumphed over the Kauravas, are not the same people they were before the war. They have been transformed by the experience, their understanding of Dharma deepened by the weight of their actions. They have won the kingdom, but they have lost something much more precious: the innocence of a world before the war began. The story of Kurukshetra is one of immense destruction, but also of profound learning. It teaches us about the complexities of duty, the consequences of our choices, and the inevitable suffering that comes with life. It asks us to question what it means to do the right thing, and whether the right thing can ever truly be known in advance. In the end, the Mahabharata does not offer simple answers. It does not present a world of black and white morality. Instead, it presents a world of grays, where the boundaries between good and evil, right and wrong, are not always clear. Kurukshetra is the ultimate test of Dharma, and in its wake, the only certainty is that the world, and those who inhabit it, will never be the same again. Chapter 6. The End of an Age and the Advent of Kali Yuga. The sound of a distant bell tolling, slow and deep, echoing through the vastness of time. The wind sighs softly through the trees as if the world itself is in mourning. The golden light of the setting sun begins to fade, casting long shadows over the land, as if time itself is drawing to a close. The world of the Mahabharata, a world where gods walked among men, where knowledge was alive, and where cities were designed according to divine wisdom, is now but a distant memory. The great war of Kurukshetra has passed, leaving behind a landscape littered with the ruins of the past. The Pandavas have won the battle, but their victory is hollow. The kingdom of Hastinapura is theirs, yet they are haunted by the immense cost of the war, the destruction, and the loss of life. With the conclusion of the Mahabharata comes the end of an age, the end of Dvapara Yuga, the third of the 4 ages of the world, and the beginning of Kali Yuga, the age of darkness. The transition from one age to another is not just a passage of time. It marks a profound shift in the fabric of existence itself. The world that once thrived in harmony with divine order now begins to unravel. What was once a time of balance and wisdom begins to fade, giving way to an era of confusion, conflict, and moral decay. This chapter explores the end of Dvapara Yuga, the rise of Kali Yuga, and the lessons we can learn from this profound shift in the cosmic order. The Pandavas returned to Hastinapura. After the devastating battle at Kurukshetra, the surviving Pandavas returned to their kingdom of Hastinapura. The victory is bittersweet. Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandavas, is crowned king, but the celebrations feel hollow. The city is in mourning, not only for the warriors lost in battle, but for the moral consequences of the war itself. The fields of Kurukshetra, once filled with valor and heroism, now lie barren, scarred by the violence that has taken place. Yudhishthira's coronation is not a joyous occasion. His heart is heavy with guilt, and he is plagued by the thought that the war, though necessary, has brought untold suffering. He is burdened by the weight of the deaths of his family members, friends, teachers, and even those whom he loved. The throne of Hastinapura, which should have been a symbol of his triumph, instead serves as a constant reminder of the moral complexity of his actions. Despite his feelings of sorrow, Yudhishthira takes his place as king and begins the process of rebuilding the kingdom. But the land of Hastinapura can never be the same again. The divine presence that once guided the Pandavas through their trials has begun to fade. Krishna, who was their protector and guide, is no longer there to offer counsel. He has returned to his heavenly abode, leaving the world to move forward without his direct influence. The departure of Krishna marks the symbolic end of Dvapara Yuga, the age that was characterized by the close connection between humans and the divine. The time of miracles, where the gods walked among mortals and the sacred and the mundane were intertwined, has come to an end. The transition into Kali Yuga, the age of darkness, has begun. The transition from Dvapara Yuga to Kali Yuga. The shift from Dvapara Yuga to Kali Yuga is not an abrupt change. It is a gradual decline, like the fading of a sunset into the night. The transition represents the cosmic cycle of creation, preservation, and destruction, a cycle that repeats itself over the course of countless ages. Each yuga, or age, has its own unique characteristics, and as one age ends, the qualities that defined it begin to disappear, giving way to a new era. In the case of the Mahabharata, the close of Dvapara Yuga marks the end of an age in which dharma, righteousness, was still upheld, even though it was often challenged. People still had a strong connection to divine wisdom, and the gods themselves were actively involved in human affairs. Knowledge was alive, and the righteous path was clearly defined. However, as Dvapara Yuga fades, the balance begins to shift. Kali Yuga is the age of darkness, ignorance, and spiritual decline. It is the final age in the cycle of 4 yugas, and it is characterized by the gradual erosion of dharma. In this age, the righteous path becomes obscured, and people lose sight of their true nature. Greed, corruption, and ego take root in human hearts, and moral values decline. The relationship between humans and the divine grows distant, and the divine wisdom that once guided the world is forgotten. The transition into Kali Yuga is marked by the gradual decline of spirituality, knowledge, and virtue. In this new age, people are driven by desire and attachment, and the pursuit of material wealth and power takes precedence over the pursuit of inner truth and wisdom. The teachings of the Vedas are misunderstood, and the sacred rituals and practices are abandoned or corrupted. The gods, once active participants in human affairs, retreat into the heavens, and their guidance becomes less tangible. The world begins to fall into confusion and chaos, the characteristics of Kali Yuga. In the Mahabharata, the characteristics of Kali Yuga are described in great detail. The age is one of spiritual darkness, where the values of truth, compassion, and righteousness are gradually replaced by selfishness, greed, and deception. The rise of materialism and the decline of spiritual wisdom create an environment where moral decay spreads rapidly. One of the key features of Kali Yuga is the loss of true knowledge. The pursuit of knowledge becomes distorted, and people become more focused on acquiring material wealth and power, rather than understanding the deeper truths of existence. The sages and rishis, who once imparted wisdom and divine knowledge, are no longer revered. Instead, people turn to superficial pleasures and false ideologies. Another defining characteristic of Kali Yuga is the erosion of family values and the breakdown of social structures. In this age, relationships are driven by selfish desires rather than love and duty. The bonds of family and friendship weaken, and people become increasingly isolated and disconnected from one another. The sense of community, which was once a cornerstone of society, begins to crumble. Corruption and deceit become widespread in Kali Yuga. Those in positions of power use their influence for personal gain, and the rulers and leaders who should protect and serve the people instead exploit them. Justice is distorted, and those who act with integrity are often overlooked or oppressed. The natural order of the world is disrupted, and chaos begins to take hold. Finally, Kali Yuga is marked by a general sense of spiritual decline. People become increasingly disconnected from their inner selves, and the pursuit of material wealth takes precedence over the search for inner peace and enlightenment. The sacred teachings that once guided humanity are misinterpreted, and the divine presence is no longer felt as strongly in the world. The gods, who once intervened in human affairs, now retreat, and the connection between humans and the divine grows faint. The departure of the Pandavas and the return to the forest. As the era of Dvapara Yuga comes to a close and the age of Kali Yuga begins, the Pandavas find themselves at a crossroads. They have ruled the kingdom of Hastinapura for many years, but they know that their time has come to an end. The world is no longer as it once was, and they feel a deep sense of loss as they witness the decline of Dharma and the rising tide of Kali Yuga. Yudhishthira, the eldest of the Pandavas, is particularly affected by the changes in the world around him. Despite his victories in battle and his success as king, he feels that the world is slipping away from him. The moral fabric of society is unraveling, and he cannot help but feel that his rule is a temporary respite, not a permanent solution. The peace he has worked so hard to build is fragile, and he sees the signs of decay all around him. At the urging of Krishna, the Pandavas decide to leave their kingdom and embark on a journey to the mountains. They renounce their worldly possessions and set out on a pilgrimage to the Himalayas, seeking to return to the divine source from which they came. They know that their time in the mortal realm has come to an end, and they must now make the ultimate sacrifice. Leaving behind everything they have known and loved, their journey to the mountains symbolizes the transition from the world of action, karma, to the world of renunciation, sannyasa. The Pandavas, who have spent their lives fighting, ruling, and seeking justice, now turn inward, seeking the ultimate truth. They know that they cannot escape the rising darkness of Kali Yuga, but they can transcend it by reconnecting with the divine. The death of the Pandavas. The journey of the Pandavas ultimately leads them to the gates of heaven, but not in their physical bodies. They must ascend to the divine realm in spirit, leaving behind their earthly forms. The Mahabharata describes their final moments as both tragic and beautiful. Each of the Pandavas faces a final trial before they can enter heaven, and they must confront their own inner doubts and fears. As they make their way through the final stages of their journey, each Pandava is tested. Yudhishthira, the eldest and most righteous, faces the greatest challenge. He must leave behind the kingdom that he has ruled with such devotion and face the consequences of the choices he made throughout his life. But despite the pain, he remains steadfast, knowing that the true goal of life is not power or wealth, but spiritual enlightenment. At the end of their journey, the Pandavas enter heaven, their souls freed from the cycle of birth and death. They have transcended the limitations of the material world and are granted eternal peace. But even in their final moments, the Mahabharata reminds us that their journey was not one of simple victory. It was one of sacrifice, moral struggle, and a constant search for truth. The advent of Kali Yuga and the consequences of moral decline, with the departure of the Pandavas and the ascension of the world into Kali Yuga, humanity faces a new challenge. The teachings of the Mahabharata remind us that the end of an age is not the end of the story. It is a turning point, a moment of reflection and realization. The advent of Kali Yuga is a reminder of the consequences of moral decline. It teaches us that when we forget our connection to the divine, when we become consumed by material desires and selfishness, the world around us begins to crumble. The gods may retreat, but the responsibility for maintaining balance falls upon us. We must continue to seek truth, justice, and wisdom, even in the face of overwhelming darkness. Kali Yuga is a time of great suffering, but it is also a time of opportunity. It is the final stage in the cosmic cycle, and the choices we make in this age will shape the future of the world. The Mahabharata teaches us that even in the darkest of times, there is hope. Hope in the possibility of renewal, redemption, and the eventual return of divine wisdom. Chapter 7. The prophetic vision of the Mahabharata and its hidden wisdom. The Mahabharata is more than just a collection of myths and legends. It is not merely a tale of gods, warriors, and kings. It is a living document containing within it the essence of knowledge, wisdom, and prophecy. When one peers deeply into its pages, the Mahabharata reveals hidden meanings, timeless truths, and prophetic visions that transcend the events of the past. The epic speaks not only to the people of ancient India, but to humanity as a whole, offering guidance for navigating the complexities of life, duty, morality, and the forces of nature. In this chapter, we will explore the hidden wisdom of the Mahabharata, the prophetic nature of its teachings, and how it continues to offer profound insight into the challenges we face in the modern world. Through its characters, its stories, and its philosophical teachings, the Mahabharata invites us to look beyond the surface and recognize the deeper truths that lie beneath the events it narrates. These are the truths that speak to the very core of human existence, truths that are as relevant today as they were thousands of years ago. The prophecy of Kali Yuga. One of the most significant aspects of the Mahabharata is its prophetic nature. While the epic is deeply rooted in the events of Dvapara Yuga, it also foresees the coming of Kali Yuga, the age of darkness and moral decay. The Mahabharata does not merely depict the end of the age, but offers a vision of what is to come in the future, providing us with a clear understanding of the consequences of our actions, the erosion of dharma, and the rise of materialism. The Mahabharata's depiction of the transition from Dvapara Yuga to Kali Yuga serves as a reminder of the cyclical nature of time and the inevitability of decay. The gods, once active participants in the world, retreat as the moral fabric of society begins to unravel. The divine wisdom that guided the world in previous ages is replaced by confusion, ignorance, and selfishness. The era of Kali Yuga is marked by the triumph of adharma, unrighteousness, where the pursuit of material wealth and power becomes the dominant force in the world, overshadowing the pursuit of spiritual truth and righteousness. As the Mahabharata predicts, the people of Kali Yuga will lose their connection to the divine, and their actions will be driven by ego, desire, and fear. The once clear path of Dharma becomes obscured, and people will no longer be able to distinguish right from wrong. The world will become a place where selfishness reigns, and the pursuit of personal gain will come at the expense of others. The spiritual practices that once connected humanity to the divine will be corrupted, and the knowledge will be distorted. Yet, despite this dark vision of the future, the Mahabharata also offers a ray of hope. It teaches that even in Kali Yuga, the potential for redemption and spiritual awakening remains. The story of the Mahabharata is not one of hopelessness, but rather one of caution and awareness. It warns us of the consequences of our actions and the importance of staying true to the path of Dharma, even when the world around us falls into confusion and decay. The wisdom of the Bhagavad Gita. One of the most profound and timeless aspects of the Mahabharata is the Bhagavad Gita, the conversation between Arjuna and Krishna that takes place on the battlefield of Kurukshetra. The Gita is often regarded as the spiritual heart of the Mahabharata, offering deep philosophical insights into the nature of life, duty, and the self. In this sacred dialogue, Krishna imparts the wisdom of the eternal soul, the nature of the universe, and the principles of Dharma, providing Arjuna, and by extension, all of humanity, with the guidance needed to navigate the complexities of existence. At the heart of the Gita is the concept of selfless action, or karma yoga. Krishna teaches that one must perform their duty, dharma, without attachment to the results, without concern for personal gain or loss. The essence of karma yoga is to act with a pure heart, dedicating all actions to the divine and letting go of the ego. By doing so, one transcends the limitations of the material world and achieves spiritual liberation, moksha. The Gita also introduces the concept of jnana yoga, the path of knowledge, and bhakti yoga, the path of devotion. Krishna explains that each individual can choose the path that best suits their nature, but all paths ultimately lead to the same truth: the realization of the self's divine nature and its connection to the eternal source. The Gita teaches that, regardless of our external circumstances, we are all bound by the same cosmic principles, and that true happiness and fulfillment come from aligning our actions with the divine will. In a world often consumed by desire, ambition, and attachment, the teachings of the Gita offer a profound counterpoint. They remind us that true peace and contentment are not found in external possessions or achievements, but in the cultivation of inner wisdom, selflessness, and devotion. The Bhagavad Gita offers a spiritual roadmap for navigating the challenges of life, and its wisdom has continued to resonate with people across cultures and generations. The Mahabharata as a mirror of the human condition. Beyond its prophetic vision and spiritual teachings, the Mahabharata is also a profound exploration of the human condition. It presents a mirror through which we can examine our own lives, our choices, and our struggles. The epic does not portray a simplistic world of good versus evil. Rather, it delves into the complexities of human nature and the moral dilemmas that we all face. The characters in the Mahabharata are not perfect or one-dimensional. They are flawed, conflicted, and deeply human. Arjuna, the great warrior, is torn between his duty as a fighter and his love for his family. Yudhishthira, the eldest Pandava, is a man of great righteousness, yet he is tested by the choices he must make in the pursuit of justice. Karna, the tragic hero, is torn between loyalty to his friend Duryodhana and his sense of honor. Even the gods in the Mahabharata, Krishna, Shiva, and others, are not without their complexities. Krishna, though divine, engages in actions that challenge our understanding of morality. This moral ambiguity is what makes the Mahabharata such a profound and timeless text. It teaches us that life is rarely black and white, and that the choices we make are often filled with shades of gray. The characters of the Mahabharata embody the inner struggles we all face. The tension between personal desires and the greater good. The conflict between ego and selflessness. The challenge of staying true to one's dharma in a world that is often confusing and chaotic. The Mahabharata encourages us to reflect on our own lives, to examine our motivations, and to strive for greater awareness of the forces that shape our actions. It reminds us that we, too, are part of a larger cosmic drama, and that our choices matter. Not just for ourselves, but for the world around us. It calls us to engage with life on a deeper level, to question our assumptions, and to seek out the wisdom that lies hidden beneath the surface. The Mahabharata's teachings for the modern world. While the Mahabharata is an ancient text, its teachings remain profoundly relevant to the modern world. In an age marked by materialism, conflict, and moral uncertainty, the Mahabharata offers timeless wisdom that can guide us through the challenges we face today. In particular, the Mahabharata emphasizes the importance of dharma, the path of righteousness, duty, and justice. In a world where moral values often seem to be in decline, the Mahabharata calls us to live lives of integrity, compassion, and wisdom. It teaches us that our actions should be guided not by selfish desires or fleeting ambitions, but by a deep sense of duty to the greater good. The Mahabharata also reminds us of the importance of selflessness and the need to let go of attachment. In a society that places such great value on individual success and material gain, the teachings of the Gita offer a powerful antidote. By practicing selfless action, by dedicating our work to the divine, we can transcend the limitations of the ego and find true fulfillment. Moreover, the Mahabharata teaches us about the cyclical nature of time, the inevitability of change, and the importance of accepting the flow of life. The transition from Dvapara Yuga to Kali Yuga reminds us that every age has its challenges, and that the struggle between dharma and adharma will continue. Yet, the Mahabharata also offers hope, reminding us that even in the darkest times, the potential for renewal remains. Through self-awareness, spiritual practice, and devotion to dharma, we can navigate the challenges of the world and find peace within ourselves. The hidden wisdom of the Mahabharata. The true depth of the Mahabharata lies not in its surface story, but in the layers of wisdom that it contains. As we have seen, the Mahabharata is a profound exploration of life, duty, spirituality, and the complexities of the human heart. It holds a mirror to our own experiences, revealing the inner conflicts, moral dilemmas, and choices that shape our lives. At its core, The Mahabharata teaches us about the importance of living in harmony with the divine order, of acting with integrity, and of seeking wisdom in every moment. It calls us to be mindful of the impact of our actions, to question our assumptions, and to cultivate awareness of the greater forces that govern the universe. The Mahabharata is not just a story of the past. It is a guide for the present and the future. Its wisdom transcends time, offering insights that are as relevant today as they were in ancient India. By reflecting on the teachings of the Mahabharata, we can find guidance for navigating the complexities of modern life and for living in alignment with the eternal truths that underlie existence. Chapter 8: The Astral and the Divine. How Mahabharata unlocks human potential. The calm murmur of the wind in the trees, a faint sense of something ancient lingering in the air. The night falls quietly, as if the universe itself pauses for a moment. Deep within these sacred stories, there lies a hidden truth, that the limits of human potential are far greater than we often believe. And in the Mahabharata, we can glimpse this potential through the extraordinary powers that emerge when the human spirit aligns with the divine. The Mahabharata, at its core, is not merely a story of gods and kings, of battles and political struggles. It is a profound exploration of human potential, of what we, as individuals and as a collective society, can achieve when we align ourselves with the higher forces of the universe. The epic is filled with characters who tap into extraordinary abilities, warriors who wield divine weapons, sages who possess the power to manipulate the very fabric of existence, and gods who walk among mortals, offering wisdom and guidance. Yet these divine and astral powers are not meant to be seen as just fantastical elements. They are metaphors for the latent potential within each of us, the potential to transcend the limits of the physical world, to elevate our consciousness, and to act as instruments of the divine will. The Mahabharata shows us that true power does not come from brute strength or material wealth, but from the alignment of our actions with the cosmic order, Dharma. In this chapter, we will explore how the Mahabharata unlocks human potential by revealing the deep connection between the divine and the human. Through the astras, weapons of thought, and vimanas, celestial vehicles, as well as the guidance of the gods, the Mahabharata teaches us that the limits of human existence are far more expansive than we typically understand. It calls us to realize our inherent divinity and to understand that when we align ourselves with the divine, we unlock our true potential as beings capable of achieving greatness in both the material and spiritual worlds. The mystical powers of the Astra, weapons of the mind. The Mahabharata is filled with vivid descriptions of powerful weapons, each one imbued with divine energy. These weapons, known as astras, are not like the swords or arrows we are familiar with. They are metaphysical forces that can only be wielded by those with the highest levels of mental discipline, spiritual alignment, and devotion. One of the most significant astras in the Mahabharata is the Brahmastra, the weapon of Brahma, the creator god. It is said to be capable of destroying the entire universe, a force so powerful that its invocation can alter the very fabric of reality. Yet the Brahmastra is not simply a weapon of destruction. It is a reflection of the power of the mind and consciousness. To wield the Brahmastra, one must have complete control over their thoughts, emotions, and intentions. It cannot be used recklessly. It requires a deep understanding of the cosmic forces at play. This concept of the Astra as a weapon of thought is profoundly important. It suggests that the true power of a weapon lies not in its material form, but in the consciousness of the one who wields it. The astra is not a tool to be used for personal gain, but a force to be invoked with wisdom, discipline, and responsibility. The Mahabharata teaches that the greatest power in the world is the power of consciousness. The ability to focus the mind and channel divine energy for the greater good. The Mahabharata also teaches us that the mind is a gateway to higher realms of existence. Just as the warriors in the epic use the astras to direct powerful forces, so too can we use our own mental faculties to shape our lives and the world around us. By aligning our thoughts with the higher cosmic order, through meditation, mindfulness, and self-discipline, we can unlock the vast potential of our minds and tap into the divine energy that flows through the universe. The power of the mind. Arjuna's mastery of the Brahmastra. Arjuna, the greatest warrior of the Mahabharata, is one of the few who possess the skill and mental discipline required to wield the Brahmastra. His ability to use the weapon and the profound wisdom that he gains in the process highlights the importance of mental clarity and spiritual alignment in unlocking human potential. At the beginning of the war, Arjuna is plagued by doubt and moral confusion. He faces the prospect of fighting his own family and friends on the battlefield, and he is paralyzed by the weight of the decision. In the famous Bhagavad Gita dialogue, Krishna teaches Arjuna the true nature of duty, the importance of selfless action, and the need to act according to Dharma. Krishna's teachings help Arjuna overcome his doubts, allowing him to focus his mind and take up his role as a warrior. When Arjuna invokes the Brahmastra during the battle, it is not merely a weapon of destruction, it is the culmination of his spiritual growth. Arjuna's ability to wield the Brahmastra is a reflection of his alignment with the cosmic order, his understanding of the deeper principles of existence, and his mastery over his own consciousness. The weapon can only be used when the mind is clear, the emotions are controlled, and the intention is pure. In this way, the Brahmastra becomes a metaphor for the power that lies within each of us when we align ourselves with the divine. In Arjuna's use of the Brahmastra, we see that the greatest power is not in physical strength, but in the mastery of the mind. The Mahabharata teaches us that when we master our thoughts, we can tap into the divine potential within us. The mind, when disciplined and aligned with the higher forces of the universe, becomes a powerful instrument for transformation and creation. The Vimanas, celestial vehicles, and the potential for transcendence. In addition to the astras, the Mahabharata introduces the concept of Vimanas, celestial vehicles capable of traversing not only the earth but also the heavens. These flying machines, though described in fantastical terms, represent something far deeper than mere technology. They symbolize the potential for transcendence and spiritual elevation. The Vimanas are said to be capable of flying at great speeds, navigating through the air with ease, and even traveling between realms. Some descriptions suggest that the vehicles were powered by Mercury, or even by the consciousness of the pilot. The Pushpaka Vimana, for example, is the chariot of Ravana, the king of Lanka, which is capable of traveling great distances at will. Ravana uses the Vimana to transport himself and others, and it is described as a vehicle of immense beauty and divine power. However, the Vimanas are not just vehicles for physical travel. They are metaphors for the journey of the soul. In the same way that the astras represent the power of the mind and consciousness, the Vimanas symbolize the ability to transcend the limitations of the physical world and reach higher realms of existence. The Mahabharata teaches us that the true purpose of human life is to transcend the material world and reach spiritual liberation, moksha. The Vimanas, in this sense, are not just tools for physical transportation. They represent the potential for spiritual ascension. Just as the Vimanas are powered by divine energy, so too can our own spiritual journeys be fueled by devotion, knowledge, and self-realization. The Mahabharata shows us that when we align ourselves with the divine order and cultivate spiritual wisdom, we can transcend the limitations of the ego and the material world. Like the Vimanas, our consciousness can soar to higher realms, guided by the wisdom of the divine and the human, achieving unity. The Mahabharata teaches that the divine and the human are not separate. They are intimately connected. Throughout the epic, we see that the gods do not merely watch from afar. They interact with the mortal world, guiding and shaping the lives of the human characters. Krishna, in particular, embodies this unity, as he serves as both a divine being and a human-like guide to Arjuna and the Pandavas. Krishna's role as a charioteer and counselor to Arjuna is significant. He is both a divine figure and a friend to the Pandavas, offering practical advice and spiritual wisdom. Through Krishna's guidance, Arjuna is able to tap into his true potential, not just as a warrior, but as a spiritually awakened being. Krishna teaches Arjuna that the path to greatness is not through the accumulation of power or wealth, but through the alignment of the self with the divine will. The Mahabharata thus teaches that the divine potential within us is unlocked when we align our actions with Dharma. The epic shows us that, like Krishna, we are capable of transcending our limitations and achieving unity with the divine when we live in harmony with the cosmic order. When we act selflessly, without attachment to the results, and when we dedicate our actions to the greater good, we unlock the full potential of our consciousness. Human potential in the modern world. The Mahabharata's teachings are not just relevant to ancient times. They are deeply applicable to our lives today. In the modern world, we often find ourselves consumed by material desires, ego, and attachment. We live in a time when success is often measured by wealth and status, and when the pursuit of happiness is often tied to external circumstances. Yet, the Mahabharata reminds us that true power lies within. The wisdom of the Mahabharata teaches us that when we align our actions with the greater cosmic order, we unlock our true potential. By disciplining the mind, cultivating selflessness, and dedicating our actions to the divine, we can transcend the limitations of the ego and tap into the higher forces of the universe. In this way, the Mahabharata offers a roadmap for personal transformation and spiritual awakening, showing us that the greatest potential we possess is the ability to align ourselves with Dharma and live in harmony with the divine will. Chapter 9. The Resilience of the Human Spirit. The soft rustling of leaves, a gentle breeze that carries the echoes of an ancient story, fading yet ever present. In the quiet spaces of time, a deeper truth resonates, one that transcends the limits of individual experience, inviting us to reflect on the enduring strength of the human spirit. This truth is not found in grand victories or epic battles, but in the resilience that emerges in moments of loss, doubt, and suffering. The Mahabharata is a narrative of many layers, a battle for power, a tale of gods and men, a story of fate and free will. But it is also a profound exploration of the human spirit's resilience, how it endures in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges, how it transforms through suffering, and how it ultimately seeks meaning in a world full of uncertainty. The Mahabharata is not just about grand battles fought on fields of war. It is also about the internal wars we each face, the battles of the heart, mind, and soul. This chapter explores the resilience of the human spirit as it unfolds through the lives of the Mahabharata's most iconic characters. From Arjuna's internal conflict at the dawn of battle to the suffering of the Pandavas, from the tragedies of Karna to the wisdom of Krishna, the Mahabharata shows us that resilience is not simply about surviving. It is about growth, transformation, and the capacity to rise again after every fall. Through the lives of these characters, we are shown that the strength of the human spirit is not determined by the circumstances we face, but by how we choose to confront them. The struggles of Arjuna, the warrior's inner conflict. Among the many powerful lessons the Mahabharata teaches, one of the most poignant is the internal struggle of Arjuna, the greatest of the Pandava brothers. Arjuna's journey begins with a crisis of conscience, a moment of doubt that strikes him on the eve of the greatest battle of his life, Kurukshetra. The morning before the war begins, Arjuna finds himself paralyzed by uncertainty. As he surveys the battlefield and sees his family, friends, and teachers arrayed on both sides, the weight of the violence he is about to unleash crushes his spirit. How could he fight against those he loves and respects? How could he fulfill his duty as a warrior when it means destruction? At this moment, Arjuna is not just faced with a military challenge. He is faced with a moral and emotional dilemma that cuts to the core of his being. His strength as a warrior, his skill with the bow and arrow, are meaningless in the face of this internal conflict. The battle in his heart is the real war, and it is one that many of us can relate to. How many times in our own lives have we found ourselves torn between duty and desire, between righteousness and personal loss, between the demands of the world and the pull of our own conscience? It is in this moment of doubt that Arjuna turns to Krishna, his charioteer, for guidance. Krishna, in turn, offers him not only counsel, but a profound understanding of the nature of duty and the eternal soul. Through Krishna's words, Arjuna learns that the battle he faces is not just a physical one, but a spiritual one. The true conflict lies not in defeating enemies, but in transcending fear, attachment, and the limitations of the ego. Krishna teaches Arjuna that action without attachment is the path to spiritual liberation. He must fight, not for personal glory or out of desire for revenge, but as a fulfillment of his dharma, righteous duty. In the face of uncertainty, Arjuna learns that true resilience lies in acting according to one's higher principles, in aligning oneself with the divine order, and in trusting that the universe will guide those who walk the path of righteousness. Arjuna's transformation throughout the Mahabharata speaks to the resilience of the human spirit, the ability to face internal turmoil, to confront personal demons, and to find strength in the midst of crisis. His internal battle is one that we all face at some point in our lives. The struggle to reconcile our ideals with the harsh realities of the world around us. The tragedy of Karna, the strength of the underdog. While Arjuna's internal conflict is one of the central themes of the Mahabharata, the epic also highlights the resilience of characters who face great adversity, yet continue to fight for what they believe in, despite the odds being stacked against them. Karna, the tragic hero of the Mahabharata, is one such character whose journey embodies the indomitable spirit of perseverance. Born to the unwed mother Kunti, Karna's early life is marked by rejection, secrecy, and shame. Though he is a son of the sun god, he is raised by a charioteer and is treated as an outsider among the elite. His deep desire to prove his worth and to rise above his circumstances fuels his determination to become a great warrior. Despite his humble beginnings, Karna's strength, skill, and loyalty earn him the respect of many, including his friendship with Duryodhana, the leader of the Kauravas. However, Karna's life is marred by a series of tragic events that continuously test his resilience. He is rejected by his biological mother, Kunti, who reveals his true heritage to him only after his loyalty to Duryodhana has already been cemented. His sense of honor and duty to his friend Duryodhana leads him to make decisions that ultimately contribute to his downfall. Despite his noble qualities and warrior skills, Karna is often forced to fight for a cause that is morally ambiguous. He stands against his own brothers, the Pandavas, whom he does not know are his blood relatives. Karna's greatest trial comes when he is faced with the ultimate test of his character during the war at Kurukshetra. Even in the face of his own death, Karna remains steadfast in his commitment to his ideals. He is a warrior of tremendous strength, but it is his unshakable resolve in the face of betrayal and misfortune that sets him apart. In his final moments, as he faces Arjuna in battle, Karna is offered the opportunity to redeem himself, to break his vow of loyalty to Duryodhana and save his life. But Karna, bound by his word and his honor, refuses. Karna's story is one of deep tragedy, but it is also one of immense resilience. Despite the injustices he faces, despite the betrayal and rejection he endures, Karna never wavers in his commitment to his dharma. He embodies the spirit of perseverance and unwavering strength, even in the face of overwhelming adversity. His resilience teaches us that it is not the circumstances of our birth or the challenges we face that define us, but the choices we make in response to them. The pain of the Pandavas, the long road to redemption. While Arjuna and Karna represent different aspects of resilience, the Mahabharata also demonstrates that even the most virtuous individuals must endure suffering and hardship as part of their journey. The Pandavas, though they are virtuous and devoted to Dharma, are subjected to years of exile, loss, and betrayal. Yet, through it all, they demonstrate remarkable endurance and strength, rising above their personal pain and continuing their fight for justice. The story of the Pandavas begins with their unjust exile from the kingdom of Hastinapura, a punishment imposed by the Kauravas after they are deceived in the game of dice. Their exile is marked by great hardship as they endure years of wandering in the wilderness, separated from their home and their loved ones. The Pandavas are forced to live in disguise, enduring the humiliation of their situation, while also maintaining their sense of honor and righteousness. Despite their suffering, they remain committed to their ultimate goal, to reclaim their kingdom and restore justice. The resilience of the Pandavas is especially evident in their ability to remain united, despite the many trials they face. Though each of them endures personal hardships, Yudhishthira's moral dilemmas, Bhima's rage, Arjuna's inner turmoil, the bond between the brothers remains unbroken. Their unwavering commitment to each other, as well as their devotion to Dharma, is what ultimately allows them to overcome the greatest challenges of their lives. In the end, after the war at Kurukshetra and the reclamation of their kingdom, the Pandavas embark on one final journey, their ascent to the mountains in search of the ultimate truth. This journey symbolizes the culmination of their spiritual growth and their ability to endure suffering is shown as the key to their redemption. It is through their suffering that they ultimately transcend the limitations of the material world, achieving peace and enlightenment. The Pandavas' journey teaches us that resilience is not just about surviving hardship. It is about using that hardship as a means of growth and transformation. Through their suffering, the Pandavas learn humility, compassion, and the deep understanding of Dharma that allows them to ultimately find peace. Krishna's wisdom, the divine resilience. One of the most profound lessons in the Mahabharata comes from Krishna, who serves not only as a divine guide and charioteer, but also as a model of resilience in the face of adversity. Krishna's role in the epic is often misunderstood as that of a distant god who intervenes in human affairs. But Krishna's resilience lies in his ability to guide others through their own struggles, while maintaining his own integrity and divine purpose. Krishna, though divine, is not immune to suffering. He witnesses the destruction of his own family, the fall of his beloved city of Dwarka, and the death of his closest companions. Yet, throughout the epic, Krishna remains calm, detached from the pain that surrounds him, always focused on the higher purpose of maintaining Dharma. He teaches Arjuna and the Pandavas that resilience comes not from avoiding pain, but from transcending it. By recognizing that all things are temporary, and that true peace comes from understanding the eternal nature of the soul, Krishna's guidance to Arjuna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, as detailed in the Bhagavad Gita, teaches us that true resilience lies in selfless action, in surrendering to the divine will, and in maintaining a sense of inner peace, regardless of external circumstances. Krishna embodies the ideal of divine resilience, showing us that true strength comes from within, from our ability to face the trials of life with grace, wisdom, and faith. Conclusion: the endurance of the human spirit. The Mahabharata is more than just an ancient epic. It is a timeless story of the resilience of the human spirit. It shows us that life is full of suffering, doubt, and adversity, but it also reveals the transformative power of perseverance, faith, and inner strength. The characters of the Mahabharata, from Arjuna to Karna, from the Pandavas to Krishna, teach us that true resilience lies not in avoiding pain or hardship, but in confronting it with courage, wisdom, and compassion. In our own lives, we are faced with countless challenges, some external, some internal. The Mahabharata reminds us that no matter the difficulties we face, the human spirit has an incredible capacity to endure and rise above. By staying true to our Dharma, by cultivating resilience in the face of adversity, and by seeking wisdom and guidance from within, we can navigate the struggles of life and find meaning and peace in even the darkest times. As we return from this journey into the heart of the Mahabharata, we are reminded that the ancient wisdom preserved in this epic is not something confined to the past. It is a treasure that remains waiting for us to rediscover, to reconnect with, and to live by once more. Though the world of Dvapara Yuga may seem far removed from our own, the teachings of the Mahabharata show us that the key to unlocking a better future lies in reconnecting with the sacredness of life itself. The ancient world, with all its divine knowledge and cosmic order, is not lost. Its memory is alive within us, waiting to be rediscovered.